Hey everybody, I'm at the Kennedy Space Center in Florida to learn about NASA's manned space program. After World War II, the United States government became serious about developing rockets for national defense and started a space program. Cape Canaveral, Florida was chosen for a launch site for many reasons: its proximity to the Atlantic Ocean and the equator, the small population of the surrounding area, and the fact that there was already a naval base stationed there. The naval base was transferred to the Air Force, at that point a brand new branch of the military, and throughout the 1950s, missile tests were performed on the Cape. Yet on October the 4th, 1957, everything changed. The Soviet Union successfully launched into orbit the first artificial satellite in space, Sputnik. The Cold War would now expand into outer space. The space race was born. After some embarrassing failures, the Army launched Explorer 1, the first American satellite, in February of 1958 from Cape Canaveral's Complex 26. The launch control room still exists today and has been converted into a museum with many vintage computers from that era. Later that year, NASA was founded as the civilian initiative of the space program. Its primary goal was sending the first astronaut into space. Yet a few years later, the Soviet Union would best the United States again. On April the 12th, 1961, cosmonaut Yuri Gagarin would achieve orbit, making him the first man in space. NASA would follow with the Mercury program, sending Alan Shepard into suborbital spaceflight a month later. But it wouldn't be until February of 1962 that John Glenn would actually achieve orbit.
Godspeed, John Glenn.
It seemed that the Soviets would win the space race. However, in May of 1961, President John F. Kennedy gave NASA a bold challenge.
I believe that this nation should commit itself to achieving the goal, before this decade is out, of landing a man on the moon and returning him safely to the Earth.
To get to the moon by the end of 1969, NASA would have to take massive steps forward in technology and spend a lot of money, around $25 billion. The plan started with Project Gemini, which would serve as a bridge to the moon. Launched in two-man capsules powered by a Titan II rocket, Project Gemini proved that men could survive for extended periods in space, rendezvous and dock with other spacecraft, and spacewalk.
Get control with it. I just needed more air.
At the same time, NASA was developing the massive Saturn rocket and test launching it from Cape Canaveral. NASA's iconic Vehicle Assembly Building was completed in 1966. The largest single-story building in the world, it was used to assemble the mighty Saturn V rocket before launch. The enormous crawler transport would then move the spacecraft at no more than 2 miles an hour to the launch pad. The Vehicle Assembly Building and the crawler were later used in the Space Shuttle program and the current Artemis program. By 1967, the Apollo program was ready for its first manned flight. The Apollo program got off to an auspicious start with a tragedy at Launch Complex 34. A fire during a test killed Apollo 1 astronauts Gus Grissom, Ed White, and Roger Chaffee. This tragedy set the Apollo program back 20 months, but by the end of 1968, Apollo 8 became the first manned mission to orbit the moon. Then, on July 20th, 1969, Apollo 11 achieved John F. Kennedy's goal.
It's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
This stunning achievement can be relived at the Apollo Saturn V Center, part of the Kennedy Space Center. After an exciting reenactment of the launch from the actual launch flight control, you can marvel at a full-scale Saturn V rocket divided into its 3 stages. You can also see the Apollo 14 command module, nicknamed Kitty Hawk, and a mock-up of the LEM lunar module, and a lunar rover vehicle, often called a moon buggy. The Kennedy Space Center is also home of the space shuttle Atlantis, which flew in space 33 times as part of the Space Shuttle program from 1985 to 2011. The Space Shuttle program saw a pair of tragedies with the loss of the Space Shuttle Challenger and Columbia, but it also saw the introduction of women and non-Caucasians to the astronaut corps. Today, NASA and the military are not the only space operators in Cape Canaveral. But their successes would not be possible without the proud history displayed at the Kennedy Space Center. So come to the Kennedy Space Center and learn about NASA's manned spaceflight. It's one of the best places in America.